working on a traditional like 5-inch square quilt, which I've never done before. And I'm actually using long sleeve shirts, which I've had here secondhand. You can see it still has a tag because it was in my shop, which I used to do locally, and I have an online shop. So I've sold both upcycles that I've sewn together, and also I always had like vintage shirts and jeans and different things, which is kind of fun, but it's so much work. And when you have a full-time job, it just feels impossible unless you sort of really want to, be out there. So I do want to sort of get back to that, but at the same time, I don't want a lot of these clothes, which I do love, but they don't necessarily move. And this is the type of thing that people will buy in person without thinking, but when it's online, it's like, they're a dime a dozen. It doesn't matter how cool your sort of like vintage, flannel shirt is at this point. There's just so many. So rather than letting them sort of collect dust in my closet, I'm starting to sort of get as much long fabric as I can from these shirts so that I can make the 5-inch squares for my first quilt. And this is kind of the accent color, and I'm actually really obsessed with it. If this shirt fit me, I would definitely not be cutting it up because I love it, but unfortunately it doesn't fit me. So it's gonna fit around me very cuddly when I turn it into a quilt. So that's how it's gonna fit me. But I think that that's another really good point. I think whenever I've done upcycles, I've always been like really conscious of the fact that if I have something, like I found this really cool kids Ninja Turtle shirt one time and I turned it into a vest in an adult extra large. So it's like, you can kind of still have your Ninja Turtle fun without sort of having to squeeze into like a child small. So these are the ones that I sort of started cutting already. And then I'm gonna get into sort of cutting up these two, which this is my dark, for contrast against the accent color. And then I have two sort of denim tone on tone colors, which I really do want to keep it mainly, denim. I have a lot of denim because that is what really sold when I was selling clothes, like at sort of vendor events. So, but at the same time, again, it's one of those things that online, it could take years to sell, a pair of jeans just having it online. So I'm kind of just like one of those people that it's like, I don't like seeing things sit there forever. And especially if I'm in a creative mood. So, the other night I sort of messed around with all the shirts, figuring out sort of which ones would make a good combination. And I really did end up with this combo that I am actually really excited to sort of just snuggle up with on the couch. And this is gonna be the backing color, which I have this sort of like, it's like a denim, but it's a soft woven fabric. And so, I have this in yards, so I think that, I'll make the sort of like bottom layer. I'm not sure what that's called. If there's any expert quilters out there that can let me know. But speaking of this is kind of like one of the reasons I'm doing the quilt, and it's because this is one of my favorite things that I've ever made. Like I dyed the fabric of this strap, I made this entire thing, and this is from a $3 Aztec quilt. So I'm really proud of this. I wear this crossbody bag all the time, here in Miami, like just running errands and stuff like that. It's kind of like, and again, what I kind of like is that the colors are very sort of like, I would say maybe earthy, but they're also just sort of like, they work well together, and not one particularly, sort of like stands out. And so I wanted to kind of follow suit with my quilt. And I had some like pink stuff, and I was like, okay, it'll be fun to have like, maybe a pop of color, a pop of pink. But then I thought about it and I was like, actually, maybe not. Like, because it's like, what it is, and I find this with working with, prints and different things too. It's that sometimes I find myself thinking, oh, I should have like a complementary color to kind of balance it out. But that's sort of like very much just like my brain thinking rather than me really looking, at what's on the paper or what's on the fabric. And so when I was just looking at these fabrics, like I eventually landed here, mainly just because, again, my eyeballs said, I like it. And I don't feel like I needed that much more to really think about. And in terms of choosing the materials, I'm still gonna do a little bit of research in terms of, and please, if you have any, quilting skills or knowledge, I'm really not sure if I'm going to add some fusible interfacing onto the pieces of fabric, like the squares, because this, I feel like this fabric is pretty tough and it could certainly, stand the test of time. And I know there's going to be basting and it's going to be quilted, so I'm not necessarily sure that it needs to, have a soft fusible sort of interfacing attached to it, even though I like the idea of kind of making it, soft like that. But the jury's still out on that one. And that's kind of the fun thing, that I feel like I'm trying to do like the heavy work on the weekends, so that if by the end of this weekend I have like my squares, which I think I'm gonna need about like 120 more or less. I want to do a 50 by 65 quilt just to start off. ChatGPT told me that was just a standard quilt size. And when I was doing 6 by 6, I needed 99. And so if I'm doing 5 by 5, I'm just assuming it's going to be like 100 something. I'm going to do the math. But for now, I'm really just focusing on cutting the fabric down to where I can pull the squares out. And specifically with this idea of using the secondhand shirts, I thought 5 by 5 because when I was measuring, 6 inches, would take me off of usually the front panel, meaning that the front panels I could usually get 10 inches from. So that was kind of my thought process in terms of why I'm doing 5 by 5 inch squares. But honestly, like what I'm really excited about, this cutting is whatever. It's not necessarily my favorite thing, but it's not the worst part. Obviously, I feel like it's very much, a time consuming part, but the part that I'm the most excited about is having all of the squares done and then being able to just like put them on the floor and then sort of like make that sort of jigsaw puzzle of how I'm gonna put them together. Like that is the part that I'm the most excited about, just because it's partly the most artistic part in the sense that, it is where all of like the color theory and the style and I would say the uniqueness come in. Like, anybody, it's over 100 squares. So it's like every single person would arrange those squares differently. And that's what I'm really interested in with the quilting process, because working with secondhand stuff, like, I've done upcycles where I've maintained, a lot of the garment and just maybe switched out sleeves or just put something, on it or whatever. But I feel like quilting really transforms things. So if something like this is an old Hollister shirt, which I love the pattern. It's like a navy and black houndstooth. So I feel like it's gonna be beautiful on the quilt. But again, this is like it says large, but I can't imagine what type of large person this might fit. I think it'll fit a large child. But I say all that to say, the style of this shirt may not be in style anymore, but on the quilt, it's like, it feels like a find, because it's kind of like a cool navy and black houndstooth, which, and there is like, I feel like a serendipitous aspect of making it from secondhand materials, to the extent that it's like, you just find what you find in thrift stores. Like, there isn't really too much rhyme or reason. You really have to go for your own style when you're thrifting, because again, like, it's not seasonal. It's not, they're not sort of like putting stuff out there for your taste. They're putting things out there for every customer's taste. So, and it's very limited in terms of stock. So they don't have one in every size and in every color. So, those constraints I feel like make for really interesting sort of art and design, because, that is really where you have to get creative, because you have limits, But yeah, I'm kind of really excited. And again, as I'm just sort of taking these pieces apart, I'm just already envisioning in my head what, like, the squares are gonna look like and how they're gonna come together. And I'm already seeing this and, getting excited. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep on cutting all of this stuff, but I do really want to document this process, not only because I think it's kind of fun and I really want to get into it, but I also need help. So I feel like maybe putting this stuff out there and, you know, you seeing me doing something wrong and commenting could maybe help me avoid disaster. But I'm really excited about it. So I think for next steps, after I get the squares done, I'm gonna sort of maybe share the process of how I'm gonna put them together and then sew them into, again, I don't know the term, but the top part of the quilt, the patchwork. Yeah, like, sew the patchwork together. I don't know.